Welcome to BRD Stories Hub, where love turns dangerous and every heartbeat hides a secret. Tonight's story isn't just about obsession, it's about how far a heart can go before it breaks. So plug in your headphones and step inside a mansion built on lies. This is She Loved the Mafia Boss Too Much, so she killed his wife. He never knew the woman who cleaned his bloodied floors, had buried his wife beneath them. The mansion slept in silence. Chandeliers glimmered faintly, catching the soft glow of the night. Every breath that moved through those marble halls carried secrets. Old, heavy, unspoken ones. Elena moved carefully, her hands trembling as she scrubbed the last stain from the floor. The scent of bleach stung her nose, but she didn't stop. She'd done this too many times. Cleaning, wiping, pretending. The stain looked fresh, though the blood was long gone. She traced it with her fingers as if touching a memory. Her eyes glistened, not with fear, but with something darker, something that almost looked like love. Behind her, heavy footsteps echoed. Slow, confident, the kind of walk that carried power. Dante Moretti. Every time his voice filled a room, the air changed. The world seemed to bow to him, his presence calm, cold, and commanding. Tonight he looked like sin in human form, his sleeves rolled, veins tense against his tanned skin, his jaw set like carved stone. "Elena," he said softly, his tone low, almost kind. "You're still awake?" She froze. "I couldn't sleep, sir." He studied her for a long second, eyes tracing the corners of the spotless floor. "You've been cleaning this same spot for hours." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her heart pounded, every beat like a warning. Beneath the floor she stood on, beneath the cold marble tiles, lay the reason for that bloodstain. His wife. He didn't know. He couldn't. Dante sighed and loosened his tie, walking past her. The faint scent of his cologne brushed her skin, and she closed her eyes, memorizing it. That scent, dark, expensive, addictive. It had ruined her long before any sin had been committed. "You should get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "The police will come again." Her throat tightened. "The police?" He nodded. "Still looking for Isabella. It's been 3 weeks, and I can't—" His voice cracked for the first time. "I can't believe she'd just disappear like that." Elena's eyes softened, guilt pressing against her ribs like a knife. She wanted to touch his hand, to tell him everything, to confess that Isabella hadn't disappeared. She was here, with them, forever. But she only whispered, "I'm sure they'll find her." Dante looked at her then. Really looked. There was something unreadable in his gaze, something broken, and for a fleeting second she thought he could see through her skin, through the lies, straight into her trembling soul. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You've been with us for years, haven't you?" "Yes, sir. You were always loyal, always quiet." She forced a smile. "That's my job." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Good night, Elena." When he turned to leave, her eyes followed him. Every step, every breath, every shadow that brushed his face. She loved him enough to destroy everything that stood between them. The moment the door closed, her body went weak. Her hands shook as she leaned against the counter, breathing hard. The silence pressed against her ears until she could hear her own heartbeat. Fast, panicked, alive. She whispered, barely audible, "He doesn't know. He'll never know." Her gaze fell back to the floor, to that perfect, spotless patch of marble. She knelt again, fingers brushing the faint line where 2 tiles met. Beneath that line was her secret, her love, her crime. She tilted her head, whispering to the floor as though speaking to someone buried below. "Don't be angry with me, Isabella. He needed peace, and I needed him." Her voice trembled, breaking mid-sentence before turning soft, tender. "I'll take care of him. I promise. You don't have to worry anymore." The clock struck midnight. The mansion returned to silence, pretending to sleep again. But beneath its polished floors, something restless stirred. A truth too cruel to stay buried forever. And upstairs, in his darkened room, Dante sat by the window, staring into the night, haunted by a feeling he couldn't name. A faint whisper brushed against his thoughts, like the echo of a voice he used to love. He didn't know it came from right below him. Morning arrived slowly, like the world was still afraid to wake up. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows, spilling across the marble floors that gleamed. Too clean, too perfect. Elena stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee she'd made for Dante. Her reflection stared back at her from the silver tray. Pale face, tired eyes, a smile that didn't belong to her anymore. When Dante entered, his presence filled the room like a quiet storm. His white shirt was half-buttoned, his sleeves rolled, his eyes shadowed by a lack of sleep. "Good morning, sir," she said softly, setting the cup down. He nodded, distracted. "Morning." He didn't look at her right away. His mind was elsewhere, searching through 1,000 unanswered questions. Every day since Isabella's disappearance, he'd started his morning the same way, staring at the front gate, waiting for something. Or someone who would never come back. "Did the police call again?" Elena asked carefully. He shook his head. "No, they say there are no new leads." Her phone last pinged near the mansion and then nothing. Her heart skipped a beat. "Near the mansion?" Dante looked up. His eyes caught hers for the briefest second. Sharp, unreadable. "Somewhere close. I keep thinking maybe she's hiding. Maybe she left because of me." Elena swallowed hard. "You think she would?" He turned away. "I gave her everything. But lately, she looked at me like I was a stranger. I didn't know how to fix it." His voice cracked a little on the last word. That small fracture broke something inside Elena. She hated the pain in his tone. She hated that it was because of another woman. She stepped closer. "You did nothing wrong." He gave a dry laugh. "Maybe not, but she's gone. And I can't even grieve properly. Because I don't know if she's dead or alive." The word dead lingered in the air like smoke. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, eyes wet, fingers trembling around the tray she still held. "She'll come back," she lied gently. "She'll realize what she lost." Dante turned his face toward her again, studying her with quiet intensity. "You believe that?" "I have to," she whispered. There was a silence between them, long, heavy, fragile. The kind of silence that carried unspoken things. She could feel his sadness wrapping around her like cold air, and she wanted to warm it. She wanted to take it away, even if it meant burning herself. "I don't know what I'd do without you here, Elena," he said softly. "You've been the only calm thing in this house." Her lips parted slightly. The way he said her name, it wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was tender, it was dangerous. "I'll always be here," she replied. He smiled weakly, unaware of how much that promise meant to her, or what it had already cost. Later that afternoon, when he left for a meeting, Elena wandered through the mansion. Each step she took echoed faintly across the marble, right above where Isabella slept in silence. The air was cool, but she felt warm, almost dizzy with emotion. She stopped near the grand staircase and ran her hand along the railing, remembering the day she first came here as a maid. Isabella had hired her. Dante barely noticed her then, but that changed the night she saw him broken. The night his enemies tried to kill him, and she stayed by his side until dawn. That night was the beginning of her downfall. From admiration came obsession. From devotion came sin. Now, as she stood in the same mansion, the line between guilt and love blurred completely. She closed her eyes, whispering under her breath, "You'll love me one day. You'll see." A sudden sound broke her trance, the sharp ring of Dante's phone from the study. She froze, the ringtone cut off, replaced by his voice, firm but shaken. "What do you mean you found something?" Her chest tightened. She couldn't hear the full conversation, only fragments. "Search again." Near the grounds, possible evidence. When Dante ended the call, his footsteps echoed fast toward the door. Elena stepped into the hallway. "Sir?" He turned, grabbing his coat. "The police found something near the East Garden." Her heart dropped. The East Garden? That was where the soil was still fresh. "What did they find?" she asked, trying to sound calm. "I don't know yet," he said, eyes cold. "But they said it belonged to Isabella." Her throat went dry. She forced a small smile. "Maybe it's nothing." He didn't answer. He just nodded and left. As the door closed behind him, Elena exhaled shakily and looked toward the east side of the mansion. Her secret was breathing again. And this time, it was calling his name. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay on her small bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, her mind trapped between past and present. Every shadow in the room seemed to whisper his name, Dante. She had loved him long before she ever dared to admit it, long before she even knew what that word meant inside this world of power and blood. Her story with him hadn't begun with romance. It began with mercy. Months ago, on a cold evening, she was cleaning the dining hall when two of Dante's men dragged in a wounded stranger. The boss himself, blood dripping from his shoulder, eyes burning with rage. He had been ambushed by rivals, barely made it home alive. Elena froze at the sight of him. The man she had only seen from a distance was now bleeding in front of her, human, fragile, and yet still terrifying. "Get a doctor." one of the guards barked. But the doctor was miles away. So Elena stepped forward, trembling, and said, "I can stop the bleeding." They hesitated, then nodded. She ran for the first aid kit, her hands shaking. As she pressed the cloth against his wound, his hand gripped her wrist. Hard, but not cruel. His voice was low, rough with pain. "You're not afraid of me?" She looked up. Should I be? That small, fragile moment became the beginning of her obsession. For the first time, someone like him, powerful, dangerous, untouchable, had looked at her, really looked at her. In the days that followed, she found herself drawn to him like a moth to a flame. She told herself it was loyalty, gratitude, but deep down, she knew it was something darker. She began noticing everything about him, the way he rolled his sleeves when he worked, the quiet hum in his voice when he read documents, the sadness that lived behind his eyes when no one was watching. And then there was Isabella, the wife, elegant, perfect, cold. She floated through the mansion like a queen who owned the air itself. Her perfume lingered in every hallway. Her laughter echoed like music. Everyone loved Isabella, everyone except Elena. Because every time Dante smiled at his wife, it felt like a knife twisting in Elena's chest. She tried to hide it, tried to be loyal. But love doesn't stay quiet forever. It starts whispering things that make sense only in the dark. One evening, while setting the dining table, Elena overheard them arguing. Isabella's voice was sharp. "You care more about your business than this marriage." Dante's reply was cold. "At least business doesn't lie to me." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Isabella stormed out, heels striking the marble. When she passed Elena, her eyes were full of tears. But her pride kept her from breaking. Dante stayed behind, shoulders tense. He didn't notice Elena standing by the door. She watched him pour a glass of whiskey, his hand trembling slightly. Without thinking, she spoke. "She doesn't deserve you." He turned, surprised. For a moment, the world stopped. "What did you say?" Elena froze. "I just meant, you do so much for her. And she still—" He stared at her, eyes unreadable, then looked away. "You don't know her. Maybe not," Elena thought. "But I know what you need." That was the night she crossed an invisible line, not by action, but by heart. She began to imagine a world where Isabella wasn't there, a world where Dante could finally see her, love her, choose her. She started staying later after work, cleaning his office long after he'd gone to bed. She memorized the sound of his footsteps, the smell of his cologne, the rhythm of his breathing when he passed by her. Love turned into worship. Worship turned into madness. And then came the night of the storm. The night Isabella found her in Dante's study, holding his coat, smiling softly at the scent of him. "What are you doing here?" Isabella demanded. Elena froze. "Just cleaning, ma'am." But Isabella saw it. She saw everything in her eyes. "Stay away from my husband," she hissed. Then she slapped her, hard. Elena's face burned, but her eyes didn't water. Something inside her snapped, quiet and final. She looked up, calm, cold. "Maybe you should tell him that yourself," she whispered. And for the first time in her life, Isabella looked afraid. That moment became the seed of everything that followed. The lie, the blood, the burial. Back in the present, Elena sat by the window, her eyes hollow, whispering to the darkness. "I loved him before she ever did. I loved him enough to keep him safe." Down below, the mansion slept in silence, and beneath its marble floors, Isabella still waited to be found. "I told her to stay away from him." But she didn't listen. Those words replayed in Elena's mind, like an echo she couldn't silence. It had been 3 days since Isabella slapped her, 3 days since that spark of humiliation turned into something darker, a quiet, burning rage. Elena moved through the mansion like a ghost now. She spoke less, smiled rarely, and watched everything. She noticed how Isabella left for her charity events in the afternoons, how Dante stayed in his office late into the night, how the security guards changed shifts every evening at 10. Every detail mattered now. Because when a heart decides to break the rules of love, it starts planning in silence. That night, Isabella came home early. The sound of her heels echoed through the hallway, sharp and confident. She looked radiant, silk dress, diamond earrings, flawless hair. Everything about her screamed power, perfection, everything Elena could never be. Elena was arranging flowers on the dining table when Isabella entered. "Still here?" Isabella's tone was sharp, her smile fake. Yes, ma'am. I was just finishing up. Of course you were, Isabella replied. She poured herself a drink, watching Elena with cold eyes. You're quite loyal, aren't you? Elena didn't answer. She just lowered her gaze. Isabella took a slow sip. Tell me something. Do you enjoy following my husband around? Always so eager to serve him. I wonder if you clean his office as well as you clean this table. Elena's fingers tightened around the vase. Isabella laughed softly. Don't pretend. I see the way you look at him. Pathetic little maid, dreaming above her place. Elena finally looked up, her voice quiet, but steady. You don't deserve him. The room went silent. Isabella's smile vanished. What did you just say? You heard me. Elena's eyes were calm now, almost lifeless. You treat him like a burden. He deserves peace. He deserves love. Isabella stepped closer, her face hard. And you think you could give him that? You're nothing in his world. Elena whispered. Then why does he talk to me more than he talks to you? The glass in Isabella's hand shattered against the floor. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. For a moment, both women froze, two storms staring at each other. Get out, Isabella hissed. Right now. Elena didn't move. I said get out, Isabella screamed, pushing her shoulder. Elena stumbled back. Her breathing turned shallow. Every memory, every cruel word, every lonely night, every stolen glance, collided in her chest like fire. Something inside her broke. She looked down at the kitchen counter, the silver knife glinting under the light. Her mind went blank, her heart went wild, and when she looked back at Isabella, it wasn't hatred she felt, it was relief. I told you, Elena whispered. You should have stayed away. The next few seconds blurred. Movement, noise, a gasp, silence. When the world came back into focus, Elena was standing still, her hand trembling, the knife slick and red. Isabella's body lay on the marble floor, her eyes wide in shock, lips parted like she wanted to speak one last time. But no words came. Elena dropped the knife and sank to her knees, her breath breaking apart. Tears mixed with sweat as she pressed her hand against Isabella's cheek. I didn't want to, she whispered. You made me. Her voice cracked with something between guilt and satisfaction. In that moment, the world outside felt far away. There was no sound of traffic, no ticking clocks, just the echo of her heartbeat and the faint hum of the refrigerator behind her. Then came the realization. Dante would come home soon. She had to act fast. She dragged the lifeless body through the hallway, her hands shaking, her mind cold. She found a way down to the basement, the old wine cellar that no one visited anymore. The floor was stone, the air was damp. She dug with trembling hands, her nails cutting against the dirt. Every handful of soil felt like another heartbeat buried. When it was done, she whispered, rest now. She covered the grave with tiles and cleaned the trail of blood with bleach until the house smelled sterile and sweet. When she was done, she stood in the middle of the room, staring at her own reflection in a nearby mirror. Her dress was ruined, her hair wild, but her eyes were calm. The kind of calm that comes when madness finally finds peace. By the time Dante returned, the house was spotless again. Where's Isabella? He asked. Elena smiled faintly. I think she left, sir. And for the first time, that lie felt like love. The house had never been this quiet. No music, no laughter, no footsteps from the upper floor. Just silence. Deep, heavy silence that made even the walls seem like they were listening. Dante walked through the mansion like a man haunted by his own shadow. Every corner reminded him of Isabella, her perfume, her voice, the echo of her heels on the floor. But she was gone. Vanished. Elena followed him at a distance, careful not to speak unless he did. She watched him stop by the staircase every evening, his eyes tracing the empty hallway that once held his wife's smile. She'll come back, Elena whispered one night. Standing a few feet away, Dante didn't look at her. It's been a week. If she wanted to come back, she would have. He sat on the edge of the couch, his elbows on his knees, his face buried in his hands. The man who once commanded an empire now looked like he was fighting ghosts. Elena took a slow step forward. Maybe she just needed time. He looked up. His eyes were red, not from weakness, but from exhaustion. Time doesn't fix betrayal, Elena. Betrayal? She asked softly. He hesitated, then sighed. I found out she'd been in contact with someone I warned her about, a man from a rival family. I think she was planning something. Elena froze. So that's what he believed. It was almost too perfect. She lowered her gaze, pretending to think. Maybe she got scared. Maybe. Dante leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I keep thinking maybe I drove her away. I've done terrible things. Maybe she just wanted to escape. Elena's heart twisted. He was blaming himself. The guilt she should have carried was sitting on his shoulders instead. She took a deep breath and knelt beside him. You're not the monster you think you are. He turned to her slowly. Aren't I? She shook her head. You protect people. You lead them. You love deeply, even when it hurts. That's not a monster. Something in his eyes softened. The walls around his heart, those cold, unbreakable walls, cracked just a little. Why are you always here? He asked quietly. Elena smiled faintly. Because I know what it's like to be alone. Their eyes met. A silence settled, not empty but heavy with something unspoken. The kind of silence that could turn into a touch, or a confession, if either of them dared. But Dante stood up abruptly. I can't do this. Do what? Feel anything right now. He ran a hand through his hair. She's gone. And I keep expecting her to walk through that door. Elena looked toward the door too, knowing exactly what lay beneath it. She whispered. Then don't wait for her. He didn't reply. He just walked away, leaving her standing in the dim light. That night, when everyone else slept, Elena crept into the basement again. She carried a single candle and walked to the far corner, the one with the freshly sealed tiles. She knelt, tracing her fingers over the cold floor. He misses you, she whispered. But don't worry, I'll take care of him. Her voice trembled. I did this for love. You understand that, don't you? For a moment, the air around her felt colder. The candle flickered. Elena smiled faintly. You'll always be part of us now. She stood up, her shadow stretching long across the walls. Upstairs, Dante tossed and turned in his bed, haunted by dreams he couldn't understand. In his dream, Isabella's voice called to him. Faint, broken. Dante, don't trust her. He woke up in a sweat, breathing hard. The room was dark, silent. When he sat up, he saw a figure standing in the doorway. Elena, are you okay? She asked softly. He rubbed his eyes. Just a bad dream. She stepped closer, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. You should rest. You've been through enough. Dante nodded. I don't know what I'd do without you here. Those words hit her like lightning. Sweet, painful, intoxicating. When she left his room, her heart was racing. The lie she'd told had begun to take root. A single lie, born from love, now feeding something darker. And somewhere deep below, in the basement, the silence seemed to breathe. Days turned into nights, nights blurred into mornings, and the mansion, that once echoed with laughter, had begun to breathe in whispers. Every sound felt alive. Every wall seemed to remember. Dante moved like a ghost, barely speaking, barely eating. His men had stopped asking questions. They knew better than to disturb the boss when grief lived in his eyes. But Elena, she moved differently. Soft, careful. Almost like she was hiding something under every step. At night, when the mansion lights dimmed and the guards changed shifts, she slipped down to the basement again. This time, she brought a glass of red wine and a single white rose. She sat on the cold floor beside the sealed tiles, her head tilted like she was listening to someone invisible. She took a sip of wine, placed the rose beside her, and whispered, I told him you ran away. I told him you couldn't handle his world. Her voice trembled, part pride, part fear. I saved him, Isabella. You were never meant for him. You were weak. You never saw the fire in his eyes. But I did. She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. I did this for him, and for me. We both loved the same man. The difference is, I was willing to bleed for him. A small crack echoed somewhere in the ceiling. Elena froze. Her candle flickered, throwing dancing shadows on the basement walls. She looked up, her heart pounding. But nothing. Just silence again. She let out a shaky breath and whispered, Don't scare me like that. Then she smiled. You're jealous, aren't you? She pressed her palm flat on the floor, right above the buried body, and leaned closer. Don't worry, she whispered, voice low, trembling. He'll never find you. He'll never know. Because I'll love him so much. He won't even remember you existed. Upstairs, Dante stirred in his sleep, as if something deep within him had heard her. He dreamed again. Same voice, same warning. Dante, she's lying. He woke up, heart racing. His hands were trembling, his throat dry. He walked to the window, looking out into the dark. The sky was clear, no rain, but the silence outside was unsettling. He whispered to himself, "Why do I keep hearing you?" Behind him the floor creaked. He turned, and there was Elena standing in the hallway again. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Just dreams." She tilted her head. "About her?" He nodded. "Yeah. She keeps calling me, telling me I'm missing something." Elena's smile faltered for a second, then returned, careful and gentle. "Dreams don't mean anything, Dante. They're just memories your mind refuses to let go." He sighed. "Maybe." Elena stepped closer, her voice calm but steady, seductive without trying. "Then let go." He looked at her. Really looked at her this time. The warmth in her eyes, the softness of her voice. For the first time in weeks, his chest didn't feel so heavy. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I should." Elena smiled, but her eyes glistened. "You won't regret it." Later that night, she returned to the basement once more. But this time she wasn't calm. Her hands shook. Her breathing was uneven. She knelt before the sealed floor and whispered through clenched teeth, "He's starting to forget you. Do you hear me?" Silence. She hit the floor with her fist. "He's mine now." Her scream echoed, bouncing off the cold concrete walls. A sound too sharp, too raw, too human. Then, slowly, her voice softened again. "But if you stay quiet, Isabella, if you let me have him, I'll keep bringing you flowers." A single tear rolled down her cheek, landing on the cracks between the tiles. For a second, it almost felt like the house sighed. A faint sound deep beneath her. She froze, then whispered, "Thank you." When she left the basement, the candle still burned faintly, flickering in the dark, and from somewhere below, in the cold earth, something or someone shifted. The mansion had changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent, but it breathed differently now. Every corner carried a hush. Every door creaked like it had something to say. Elena moved through the hallways like a shadow. She had memorized every sound of this house, the sigh of the old wood, the hum of the air vents, the faint dripping from the kitchen faucet. But lately, something new had joined the symphony, whispers, soft, almost delicate. Like the air itself had started remembering secrets. It began one night, quiet, still, 3 a.m. Dante was asleep upstairs, chest rising slow, dreamless for once. Elena sat alone in the living room, sipping wine, staring at the grand piano she could never play. The candle beside her flickered, though there was no wind. Then, faintly, she heard it. A voice, "Elena." Her heart stopped. The glass in her hand trembled. She turned, eyes scanning the empty hall. Nothing. Just silence again. She whispered to herself, "You're tired." That's all. But when she stood to leave, she saw it. A muddy footprint near the staircase. Barefoot, small, feminine. She froze. Her throat went dry. That's not possible. The floor had been cleaned. She had cleaned it herself. Elena stepped closer, slow, hesitant. The print led toward the basement door. Her hands shook as she reached for the handle. The metal felt ice cold. When she opened it, a wave of stale air greeted her, mixed with something else, something floral. Isabella's perfume. She stumbled back, whispering, "No, no, you're gone. You can't be." "Elena." This time the voice was clearer, soft, familiar, and it was coming from below. She slammed the door shut, locked it. Her chest heaved. Tears filled her eyes. "Stop it," she whispered to herself. "Stop." She's dead, but the house didn't stop. The chandelier above her swayed slightly, its crystals clinking together like faint laughter. Upstairs, Dante stirred. He woke up. Again. He didn't know why, but he could feel something. A chill across his skin. A scent? Roses. His wife's scent. He sat up slowly, confusion etched on his face. "Elena?" he called out. She wiped her tears, forcing calm into her voice. "Coming!" She walked upstairs, forcing a smile, her eyes red. Dante looked at her. "Were you crying?" She shook her head quickly. "Just tired." He frowned. "I smelled her perfume again. Do you ever smell it?" Her heart skipped. She smiled softly, trying to play it off. "It's in your head, Dante. Grief does that." But Dante wasn't sure anymore. He walked past her into the hallway. The air felt thick, heavy, almost charged. The chandelier swayed again. He stopped. "Elena," he whispered. "Why is the chandelier moving?" Her lips parted. No words came out. Then, click. The basement door unlocked by itself. They both turned. Dante frowned. "Did you leave it open?" Elena's voice trembled. "No." He took a step toward it, but she grabbed his arm. "Don't go down there." He looked at her, surprised by the panic in her tone. "Why not?" "Because," she stammered, "because it's damp and unsafe. The floor's cracked." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. But as he turned away, the whisper returned, faint but undeniable. "Dante," he froze. His eyes darted to Elena. "Did you hear that?" Elena swallowed hard. No, but her voice was too soft. Too careful, he didn't press her. He just walked upstairs quietly, but his mind wouldn't stop spinning. That night, Dante couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Elena sat outside his room, her back to the door, tears streaming silently down her face. She whispered to the empty hallway, "Stop haunting me, please." But somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, the faintest sound answered her, a knock, just one. Then silence again, and for the first time, Elena realized the dead don't always rest. Especially when their love was stolen. For the first time in weeks, the mansion felt almost quiet, almost. The whispers had faded, or maybe they'd just learned when to hide. But the silence wasn't peace. It was the kind that comes right before a storm. Dante sat in his study, staring at a glass of whiskey that had long lost its chill. The room was dim, shadows curling along the edges of the walls. Everywhere he looked, he saw traces of her, Isabella, her piano in the corner, her favorite book still half open on the table, her laughter buried in his memory, and yet, when Elena entered, something in him breathed again. She moved quietly, her steps soft, her eyes careful. She had learned when to speak and when silence was safer. "Another sleepless night?" she asked gently. He didn't look at her. "They don't end anymore." Elena hesitated, then walked closer. "You should try resting, sir." He gave a short, dry laugh. "Rest in this house?" His tone was sharp, but his eyes were tired. When he finally met her gaze, she saw it. The pain, the loneliness, and the faintest spark of something else. Elena placed her hand on the table. "You don't have to face this alone." That line, so simple, so dangerous. Dante looked at her again. Really looked. Her face pale in the lamplight. Her eyes, soft yet unreadable, and for a moment he let his guard drop. "Elena," he whispered, "why do you stay here, after everything that's happened?" She smiled faintly. "Because you need someone who understands your silence." Her voice, calm, warm, felt like a lullaby for his broken heart. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "I don't even know what to believe anymore." "You don't have to believe," she said softly. "You just have to feel again." There was a pause. Heavy, intimate. The kind that pulls two souls closer without words. Elena walked around the desk, standing beside him. Her hand brushed his shoulder, light as air. He didn't move away. In that moment, grief and temptation became the same thing. He closed his eyes. The smell of her perfume, not Isabella's but hers, filled the space between them. It felt wrong. It felt alive, Elena whispered. "You've punished yourself enough." Dante's jaw tightened. "You think I can just forget?" "No," she murmured. "But maybe you can remember differently." Her fingers lingered on his hand. He didn't stop her. The air shifted. The walls seemed to listen. Downstairs, deep under the floor, something groaned softly, like the earth remembering what it held, but they didn't hear it. Elena knelt beside his chair. Her eyes glistened. She wasn't faking the emotion. She did love him, in her own twisted way. "Let me take care of you," she said, voice trembling. "Let me fix what's left." He opened his eyes. And for the first time since Isabella's disappearance, Dante didn't feel completely alone. He reached for her hand, slow, uncertain. The moment his skin touched hers, something electric passed between them. Elena closed her eyes, tears slipping down, because this was everything she had wanted, and everything she had destroyed to get here. For a moment, their world stood still. Grief wrapped in warmth, sin disguised as comfort. Then, somewhere beneath the house, a faint knock echoed. Neither of them reacted, but a chill spread through the floor. Elena whispered, "It's just the pipes." But she knew it wasn't. She knew it was her. Isabella, watching, waiting. Dante pulled her closer, needing something real, something human. She leaned into him, her heart racing, whispering against his chest. "I'll never leave you. Ever." And maybe it was true, because love that's built on guilt never dies. It just hides in the dark, waiting to be heard again. The night felt endless. The kind of night that doesn't sleep. It just watches you breathe. The mansion was quiet again. Too quiet. Dante sat near the fireplace, a book open in his hands, though he hadn't turned a page in an hour. Elena stood by the window, staring into the blackness outside, her reflection trembling in the glass. Neither of them spoke, but silence can be louder than words. Dante finally said, "It's strange. The nights feel longer since she's gone." Elena didn't look at him. Some people, they take the light with them. He nodded slowly. And yet, sometimes I feel like she's still here, watching. Elena's hand twitched. Maybe she never left. He turned to her, curious. "What do you mean?" She forced a smile. "Memories, I mean. They linger. Especially when there's love involved." The fire cracked. A single spark leapt and died on the rug. Dante exhaled. "Do you believe in guilt, Elena?" She froze. "Guilt?" He stared into the flames. "That it can haunt a person, live inside their walls, change the way they see the world." Her throat tightened. "Yes, I do." He looked at her now, really looked. "Then you understand what I mean when I say, sometimes I feel like this house is trying to tell me something." Her eyes watered. "Maybe it's telling you to let go." Or, he whispered, "maybe it's warning me." The words sliced through her like glass. Elena stepped closer. "Dante," her voice cracked. "There's something I need to tell you." He looked up. "What is it?" She hesitated. Her heart pounded. Every part of her screamed, "Say it. Say what you did. Say how you buried her. Say how every time you touch him, you can feel her blood on your hands." But she couldn't. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Dante frowned. "Elena," her eyes filled with tears. And then, a sound. From the hallway. A soft, dragging noise. Slow. Uneven. Like someone walking barefoot on marble. Dante stood immediately. "What was that?" Elena froze, her pulse racing. "Probably the wind." He grabbed a gun from the drawer. "That wasn't the wind." She tried to stop him, but he was already halfway to the door. The hallway was dim. Shadows twisted across the walls. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer, just silence. And then, a faint thud from the basement. Elena's blood turned cold. He turned toward her. "Again from the basement. That's the third time this week." She swallowed hard. "Please, just leave it." He stared at her, suspicion flickering for the first time. "Why are you so afraid of that place?" "I'm not." "Yes, you are." His voice was calm, but heavy with curiosity. "Because nothing good lives in the dark, Dante." He walked past her, heading for the basement door. But as he reached for the handle, the lock clicked by itself. They both froze. He turned to her. "Did you see that?" Elena whispered. "Don't open it." His hand lingered on the handle. The air felt colder. The smell of roses drifted faintly through the hall. Dante shivered. Her perfume again. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Please, don't go down there." He turned toward her, searching her face, and saw it. The fear, the guilt, something deeper than grief. "Elena," he said softly, "what aren't you telling me?" Her lips trembled. Her eyes glistened. And then she broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "I never wanted this." He took a step closer. "Wanted what?" She looked up at him, lost, shattered. "Everything. The house, the silence, the lies." He touched her face, gently wiping her tears. "Then tell me the truth." Her breath shook. "If I do, you'll never look at me the same." He said quietly, "Then maybe I already know." Her eyes widened. For a heartbeat, it felt like everything might collapse. Then, the sound came again. From the basement. Louder this time. They both turned toward the door, and just like that, the moment was gone. The confession swallowed back into her throat. Dante whispered, "Tomorrow." "I'm opening that door." Elena's heart stopped. She smiled weakly, hiding her panic. "Then I'll make sure it's clean." But when he turned away, her face fell, pale, ghost-like. She whispered under her breath, "You won't like what you find, Dante." The morning came quiet. Too quiet for a house that carried so many secrets. Dante stood by the window, watching the sunlight spill across the garden. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. The flowers looked wrong. The air felt heavy. Elena was outside, watering the roses like she did every morning. She wore white gloves, the same ones she always used when she wanted to hide something. He watched her move slowly across the grass, every motion calm, rehearsed, almost fragile. For a moment, he thought about how strange life had become, how silence had replaced laughter, how comfort had turned into confusion. Then the gardener appeared, old, quiet, the kind of man who never talked much. He was digging near the far edge of the garden, fixing a broken irrigation pipe. But then, his shovel hit something hard. Clink. He frowned, bent down, and brushed the dirt away with his hands. Something shimmered beneath the soil. Silver, small, circular. He picked it up. It was a ring, Dante's wife's ring, the one she never took off. The world around him went silent. Elena froze. For a moment, her hand hovered midair, the watering can spilling slowly onto the roses. The gardener looked confused. Sir. This was under the soil. Must have dropped long ago, maybe. Dante didn't answer. He just stepped forward, eyes locked on the ring, like it was pulling him in. He took it from the gardener's hand, turning it between his fingers. The inscription inside still clear. Forever, D+. His throat tightened. He whispered, Impossible. Elena said softly, Maybe she lost it here once. You know how she loved the garden. But her voice wavered, just slightly. Dante looked at her. She never lost it. I would have known. Elena forced a smile. Then maybe someone moved it here. The cleaners? The staff? He just stared at her, silent, studying her eyes. The way she wouldn't hold his gaze, the way her hands trembled when she reached for the watering can again. The gardener excused himself quietly, sensing the tension. When he was gone, the air between them felt sharp, like glass. Dante whispered, You've been taking care of this garden since she disappeared, haven't you? Elena nodded. Yes, sir. Every day. Yes. He stepped closer. So tell me, how did this end up here? Her breath hitched. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. I don't know. Dante looked at the ground again, at the dirt, at the small, disturbed patch near the rose bushes. For the first time, something inside him twisted, a feeling darker than grief, heavier than doubt. Elena, he said slowly. Did you ever see her here? The day she went missing? Her lips parted, but no sound came. He took another step forward. Answer me. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. I saw her that morning, she whispered. She came to the garden. What for? She wanted to cut some roses. And then? Elena swallowed. Then she went back inside. The lie burned her tongue. He stared at her for a long moment, like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he turned away, the ring still in his hand. He said quietly, If these walls could talk, if this garden could speak. Elena whispered, Some secrets should stay buried. He looked back, confused by the tone in her voice. What did you say? She forced a soft smile. Some memories don't deserve to be dug up. He nodded slowly, but his mind was no longer calm. Something had cracked open, a piece of truth finally bleeding through the lies. As he walked back to the house, Elena sank to her knees by the roses. Her fingers dug into the soil, trembling. Her voice broke into a whisper only the earth could hear. Please, stay quiet. And from deep below the roots, the faint scent of perfume rose. Familiar, haunting, eternal. The next morning didn't bring peace. It brought police. 2 black cars rolled up the driveway. Quiet, heavy, unwanted. Their doors opened in unison. Detective Moretti stepped out, tall, calm, eyes that never missed a thing. Behind him, 2 officers moved toward the mansion gates. Dante met them at the door, composed but cold. Detective, he said, I thought we were done with the investigation. Moretti smiled faintly. We were, until something new came up. He handed Dante a small evidence bag. Inside, the silver ring. Dante's expression didn't move. It was found in my garden. Moretti nodded. Yes. Odd place for it to turn up after all these months. Elena stood a few steps behind, trying to stay still, invisible. Her heart was hammering so loud she swore the detective could hear it. Moretti's gaze flicked to her for half a second, and lingered. He had the look of a man who recognized guilt when he saw it. He turned back to Dante. We'll need to take another look around, if that's all right. Dante hesitated. Of course. The officers spread through the mansion like silent ghosts. Footsteps echoed against marble, voices low and serious. Elena's hands trembled. She tried to keep busy, fixing curtains, wiping already clean tables, pretending this was just another morning. But inside, panic churned. Every step they took, every door that opened, felt closer to the truth. One officer approached Dante. "Sir, there's a small section of disturbed soil near the roses. Fresh, maybe a few weeks." Elena's blood turned cold. Moretti raised a brow. "We'll dig a little, just to be sure." Dante said nothing. His eyes flicked toward the garden, then toward Elena. She avoided his gaze. Outside, shovels pierced the ground. The sound echoed through the halls like a heartbeat. Inside, Elena gripped the counter, whispering under her breath, "No. Please no." Minutes passed. Then, one of the officers shouted, "Detective!" Everyone froze. Moretti walked to the garden. Elena followed slowly, her legs shaking. They'd uncovered a piece of fabric. White, torn, delicate lace, the kind only one woman in that house ever wore. Moretti knelt down, brushing the dirt aside. His tone stayed calm, almost polite. "Mrs. Dante's last dress, perhaps?" Elena's throat tightened. "It could be anything," she whispered. He stood, eyes sharp. "Yes, but it's always anything. Until it's not." Dante looked at her, not with anger, not yet, but something darker. Recognition. The silence between them felt like judgment. Elena stepped back. I didn't know it was there." Moretti's eyes didn't move. "You take care of this garden, don't you?" She nodded weakly. "Yes." "And you never saw this?" Her voice cracked. "No." He nodded slowly, jotting something in his notebook. "Funny thing about secrets," he said softly. "They like to live close to the people who hide them." The words stabbed deep. By evening, the police were gone. They'd taken the ring, the lace, and a piece of Dante's peace with them. The mansion felt heavier when night returned. Elena stood in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Behind her, Dante entered quietly. He didn't speak. She turned slowly. "I made dinner." He said nothing, just walked past her, to the basement door. Her heart stopped. "Dante, please." He looked at her, voice low. "Do you believe in ghosts, Elena?" Her lips trembled. "No." "Then tell me why I hear her crying when I stand near this door." She froze. No lie could save her now. He stepped closer, his tone calm but sharp. "You've been with me every day since she vanished. Every night, every morning. So tell me." His voice lowered to a whisper. "Where is she?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. Her lips parted. But again the words refused to come. Because outside the wind picked up, and for just a second, from somewhere deep below the floor, they both heard it. A faint whisper. A woman's voice. Dante stepped back, his face pale. Elena whispered shakily, "It's nothing." But they both knew. The walls were starting to talk. Rain started again that night. Not gentle. It slammed against the windows like fists. Like the world was trying to break in. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the same dress she'd worn all day. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her breath came in short, uneven bursts. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't moved. She just waited. Dante hadn't spoken since the police left. He'd gone to his study, locked the door, and stayed there for hours. No footsteps, no sound, just silence that screamed louder than words. When the clock hit midnight, she couldn't take it anymore. She walked to the study, slow, hesitant, barefoot on cold marble. The door was half open. A single lamp burned on the desk, lighting Dante's face in a pale glow. He sat still, staring at a glass of whiskey that hadn't been touched. His eyes didn't lift when she entered. She whispered, "Dante, please say something." "Nothing." She stepped closer. "You think I did it, don't you?" Finally, he looked up. His voice was quiet, heavy. "I don't think, Elena, I know." The air cracked. Tears stung her eyes instantly. He rose from the chair, slow, deliberate, terrifyingly calm. "Tell me where she is." Her voice broke. "I can't. Then I'll find her myself." He started walking toward the door. She grabbed his arm, desperate. "Please, just listen to me." He stopped, not because he wanted to, but because the sound of her voice trembled with something he'd never heard before. Elena's eyes were wild, red, empty. Her words spilled out, like the truth had been fighting to escape her for weeks. I loved you, Dante. I loved you too much. She clutched her chest like it hurt to breathe. Every time she touched you, every time she smiled at you, it felt like dying. He stared, frozen. I tried to stop it. I prayed. I told myself you could never love me. But then you looked at me that night. Her voice cracked. When you said thank you, when you held my hand, that was the moment. I thought maybe I mattered. She laughed, broken, breathless. I was wrong, wasn't I? Dante's expression didn't move, but his hands clenched. His voice was low, deadly quiet. What did you do, Elena? Her tears mixed with rain dripping through the half-open window. She found out. She came to the kitchen. She called me pathetic. Her tone changed, softer, distant. She said you'd never love a girl like me. The room felt smaller, darker. She grabbed my wrist. And her breath caught. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't. Silence. Only rain. I pushed her. She fell. She didn't move. Elena covered her mouth as if the words could be shoved back in. It was an accident. Dante's face drained of color. His voice barely came out. And then? I panicked, she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I just kept hearing her voice, saying you'd never love me, saying I was nothing. So you buried her. Not a question. A statement. Elena nodded, sobbing. I couldn't lose you. Not after everything. You needed someone. I thought if I stayed, if I took care of you, maybe one day you'd love me back. Dante stepped closer, the floor creaking under his shoes. His eyes glistened, not with pity, but rage restrained by an inch of control. You loved me? He said softly. She nodded. He whispered, then why does it feel like you destroyed every part of me that ever could? Her knees gave out. She fell, crying at his feet. I'm sorry. Please, Dante, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to be enough. He stared down at her, silent. No tears, no anger, just hollow disbelief. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than the rain outside. You didn't love me, Elena. He turned away. You loved what you couldn't have, and you killed what I couldn't live without. She reached for him, but he was already walking out. Her hand hovered in the air, reaching for a ghost that was already gone. The door slammed, and the sound echoed through the mansion like the final heartbeat of everything she'd ever loved. The house was silent. Not peaceful, hollow, like the air itself had stopped moving. Elena's sobs echoed faintly through the hallway, muffled by her own trembling hands. But Dante didn't hear them. Not really. He stood in the middle of the study, eyes locked on nothing. The truth hung in the air, poisonous, heavy, final. His wife was gone, and the woman who'd taken care of his home had buried her beneath it. The words kept replaying in his head. I loved you too much. She was in the way. He repeated them silently, as if trying to find another meaning, one that didn't tear him apart. But every repetition stabbed deeper. He lifted his hand, staring at the faint stain of dust on his palm, the same dust from the floor Elena had cleaned, the same floor that covered Isabella's grave. A breath left his lips, sharp, uneven. It sounded like the start of a sob, but no tears followed. The world blurred around him. The lamp on the desk flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked, cruelly steady. Elena knelt outside the study door, whispering his name. Dante, please, say something. But he didn't. He couldn't. Inside his chest, something cracked. Not loud, not violent, but final. Like glass breaking in slow motion. Memories came flooding in. Every laugh, every touch, every late-night whisper with his wife. He saw Isabella's smile when she'd teased him about working too late. The way her perfume lingered on his suit. The last time she'd kissed him before leaving for the weekend. And then, Elena's eyes. The way she'd watched him that night. Silent, trembling, too close. He remembered the tea she'd brought him afterward. The soft, fake sympathy when he'd cried for Isabella. The way her hands had stayed a little too long on his shoulder, every memory twisted now, every kindness corrupted. He walked to the mirror near the wall, staring at his reflection. He didn't recognize the man staring back. The scar on his jaw, the cold stare, the emptiness behind his eyes. It wasn't him anymore. It was someone hollowed out by betrayal. Behind him, Elena crept into the room, hesitant, terrified. Her voice broke. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear. He didn't turn. He just said quietly, you buried her, where I sleep. Elena's breath hitched. Her fingers shook. Dante, please. He turned now, slow, deliberate. His eyes were empty, but his jaw was tight. The veins in his neck stood out as he whispered, "You made me live on top of her grave." Elena flinched like he'd hit her. Her lips parted, but no sound came. He stepped closer, one step, then another. Every movement felt controlled, dangerous. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The silence did all the screaming for him. "You clean this house every day," he said softly. "But you couldn't clean the filth inside your soul." Elena's tears blurred her vision. "I was trying to love you." "Love?" He laughed, hollow, bitter. "You don't love someone by killing what they love." The sound of his voice shook her. Because it wasn't anger anymore. It was disgust, disbelief. A man grieving something he could never bury deep enough. He walked past her. Elena tried to stop him, clutching his sleeve. "Please don't leave me. You're all I have." He looked down at her hand. Her fingers trembled, stained with the dirt of what she'd done. He pulled away slowly, eyes fixed on her face. "You should have thought about that," he whispered, "before you became my nightmare." Then he left the room. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the corridor, slow, final. Elena fell to her knees, her sobs echoing off the walls. The house itself felt alive, breathing with guilt, humming with secrets. And Dante, standing in the dark hallway, pressed his palms against the wall. The same wall that hid everything he'd ever loved, everything she'd taken. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since she confessed, he wished he'd never met her at all. Dante didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, eyes open, staring at nothing. Every corner of the mansion felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by the weight of truth. He could hear Elena's quiet sobs echoing from the hallway. She hadn't left. She was too afraid of him, afraid of what he might do next. The clock struck 3. He stood up, slow, deliberate, the kind of movement that doesn't come from anger, but from a decision. When he opened the study door, she was sitting on the stairs, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Dante," she whispered, "please, don't hate me." He looked down at her with eyes so cold they didn't seem human. "I don't hate you, Elena," he paused. "I just finally see you for what you are." She flinched at the words. "You don't understand. I did it because—" He cut her off. "Because you loved me." "I know." His tone was flat, empty. "You said it enough times." She swallowed hard. "Then you know I didn't mean to hurt you." Dante stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her face. "Didn't mean to hurt me?" he said softly. "You buried my wife under my feet and watched me grieve her every single day. You served me coffee while standing over her grave. You let me cry in your arms, Elena." Her voice broke. "I just wanted you to be happy." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "You wanted you to be happy. You wanted to erase her, so I'd have no one left but you." She tried to stand, but he didn't move back. His presence was a wall, solid, immovable, cold. He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, and let it fall to the floor. It was a ring, Isabella's wedding ring. Dirt still clung to it. Elena gasped. "Where did you—" "The gardener found it," he said quietly. "In the garden, where you hid what you did." Her knees trembled. He crouched down, leveling his eyes with hers. "You lied to me. You lied to the police. You lied to yourself." His voice dropped lower. "Now it's time to tell the truth." She shook her head, stepping back. "Please, Dante, I'll go away." "I'll disappear," he interrupted, voice almost a whisper. "No, you're not leaving this house again." Her eyes widened. What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He just turned, motioning for her to follow. His steps echoed down the corridor, slow, heavy, final. She hesitated, then followed. Every step felt like walking deeper into something she couldn't escape. He led her to the back of the mansion, to the cellar door. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer. Elena froze. "Why are we here?" Dante didn't look back. He opened the door. The darkness below seemed to breathe. "I want you to see what love turned you into," he said quietly. He walked down first. She followed, shaking. The air in the basement was thick, damp, heavy, suffocating. Dante stopped in front of a spot on the ground that looked freshly disturbed. He stared at it for a long moment before speaking. "You stood here, didn't you? That night." Elena's lips trembled. "Dante, please." He turned to her, eyes glinting under the single dim bulb. "This is where she should have been safe. And you made it her grave." Tears ran down Elena's face. "I loved you. I did it because—" He took a step closer. "You did it because you couldn't handle the truth." He whispered, "You were the maid, Elena. You were never her." Her heart broke all over again. She reached out, trembling, Dante, he grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, not cruel, just final. You wanted forever with me, he said softly. Now you'll have it. She froze, realizing what he meant. Her breath quickened. No, please, Dante, don't. He leaned closer, his voice calm, terrifying. You buried her beneath this house. Now you'll stay here too. For a second, the world stopped. Her scream caught in her throat, too broken to come out. He didn't move right away. He just looked at her, one last time, with something like sadness in his eyes. Then he whispered, This house deserves silence again. The cellar door creaked shut. The sound was small, but it carried like thunder in that empty space. Elena's back hit the cold wall. Her breath came fast, uneven, terrified. Dante stood in front of her, still as stone. His eyes looked darker now. No fury, no mercy. He whispered, You said this house was ours. A slow pause. It never was. She shook her head, words tumbling out between sobs. Please, I'll confess. I'll go to prison. I'll do anything, Dante, just don't do this. He stared at the dirt floor, then at her. You already chose what happens here. He moved toward the corner of the room, pulled away a wooden plank. Beneath it, earth. Damp, disturbed. Her knees went weak. She recognized the spot instantly. That's where she'd knelt, where her trembling hands had pushed soil over Isabella's still face. Her voice cracked. No, please don't make me. He didn't answer. He only picked up the small shovel leaning against the wall and threw it at her feet. Dig, he said quietly. She froze. What? Dig? He repeated. You took her from me. Now bring her back. Her fingers trembled as she knelt, touching the dirt. Cold, wet, heavy. Every scrape of the shovel sounded like thunder. Minutes stretched. Her sobs turned into whimpers, then silence. The air filled with dust and guilt. Dante watched, motionless. Each breath came slower, each heartbeat quieter. Finally, the metal edge hit something solid. Elena froze. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't blink away. Dante stepped closer, kneeling beside her. His voice was barely a whisper. Look at what you did. She couldn't. Her hands shook so violently that the shovel slipped. He reached down, brushed away a bit of dirt, and saw the faint shimmer of a silver necklace. Isabella's. He stared at it for a long moment, too long. Then he exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a growl. This ends tonight. Elena's chest rose and fell rapidly. Please, Dante, I love you. He looked at her, eyes wet but empty. No, he said softly. You love the idea of being forgiven. She reached for his arm. He stepped back. Her hand fell through air. He pointed toward the pit. Now you know where you belong. Her face went pale. You can't mean... His voice cut her off, sharp but quiet. You took her place once already. For a long moment, neither moved. Only the sound of the house settling above them. Then Dante stepped forward, grabbed her by the shoulders, and pushed her to her knees beside the open grave. She didn't fight. She just whispered, I never wanted it to be like this. He answered without emotion. It already is. He leaned down, his breath close to her ear. Do you hear it? She shook her head, terrified. The silence, he whispered. It's what love sounds like after it dies. And then he let go. She fell forward, into the earth she had once shaped for another. Dante stood there, watching the dust rise. For a second, his chest heaved like he might scream, but he didn't. He picked up the shovel, slow, deliberate. Each drop of dirt that hit the ground sounded heavier than the last. He didn't look away. Not once. When it was done, he stood there, breathing hard. The light bulb above flickered, dimming with each swing of the shovel. He whispered one last time. Now she can rest. He dropped the shovel. It clanged against the concrete, loud, final. He turned toward the stairs, wiped his hands on his coat, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Inside the cellar, the dirt settled. The silence returned. Two graves, side by side, hidden beneath the mansion that had witnessed everything. The night had gone quiet. Too quiet. Even the walls seemed afraid to breathe. Dante stood at the top of the cellar stairs, his hands still trembling, though he didn't notice. The dirt under his nails had dried. The cold of the shovel still lingered in his grip. Even after he'd let it fall, he leaned against the wall, eyes unfocused. His heartbeat felt like it was echoing through an empty room that no longer belonged to him. Down below, the silence stretched, deep and endless. He tried not to picture her face. He tried not to remember her voice. But the mind doesn't forget the sound of a soul breaking. He pressed his palms to his eyes. For the first time since it happened, he whispered, barely audible, Elena, Her name tasted like ash. He walked to the fireplace, still lit from hours before. The flames had grown weak, but they were still alive, still fighting for air. He stared into them like a man looking for something lost. His reflection in the fire looked older, tired, a stranger. He whispered, "You loved me too much." A pause, "And I loved you too late." He turned, glancing toward the cellar door. His eyes softened for the first time in hours. A whisper echoed in his memory, faint, trembling Elena's voice. "At least now I'll be close to you." Forever. He didn't want to hear it, but it played anyway. Over and over, he walked toward the piano in the living room, Isabella's piano, the same one she used to play on rainy nights, the same one Elena had polished after every song. He touched one key. A single note filled the air, soft and cracked. It faded almost immediately. Still, it was enough to bring tears he hadn't known were waiting. He sat down, elbows on his knees, hands gripping his hair. For the first time, he let himself cry. Not loud, not desperate, just silent, endless tears for everything love had destroyed. He whispered to the empty room. Was any of it real? The fire answered with a faint crackle, like laughter from somewhere distant. He closed his eyes and leaned back. The house creaked above him, wood settling, air shifting. But in that sound, he swore he heard her voice again. "Don't be angry. It's over now." He whispered back, "It's never over." The next morning, the mansion looked peaceful. Sunlight touched the curtains. Birds chirped outside the windows. But inside, the air stayed heavy, unmoving. The servants would find him there later, sitting by the cold fireplace, staring at nothing. Lips parted like he'd been about to speak. On the table beside him lay two objects, Isabella's ring and a small silver locket. Inside the locket, a photo of Elena, her eyes bright, her smile small, back when she was just the maid who wanted to be loved. The two women now rested beneath the same roof, and Dante above them, sat between their ghosts. He whispered one last time, voice breaking, "You both loved me. And I destroyed you both." The words faded into the stillness. No answer came, only silence. Only peace that felt too heavy to carry. And for the first time in years, the same house that had held secrets, screams, and sin finally went still. The mansion had never been this quiet. Even the clock seemed afraid to tick. Dante stood in the hallway, his reflection caught in the black glass of a painting. Unblinking. Hollow. His shirt was still stained. Faint traces of the night that had ended everything. Outside, dawn crept slowly, spilling light over marble floors that had once echoed with laughter. Now, only silence answered him. He walked through the corridor, his shoes barely making a sound. Every step felt heavier, as if the house itself remembered what he'd done. The scent of roses still lingered in the air. Elena's roses. He used to think they smelled like peace. Now they reeked of memory. He reached the study, where she once used to leave his tea, careful and trembling, afraid to speak too much but desperate to be near him. The cup still sat there, empty, untouched for days. He sat down, elbows on the desk, fingers pressing into his temples. His heart didn't beat the same anymore. It wasn't grief alone. It was something colder, something that came when love curdled into regret. He remembered her eyes. That wild love, that madness she called devotion. He had seen it too late. "She loved me too much," he whispered. The words sounded strange in the still air, almost like a confession to the ghosts. Somewhere deep in the mansion, a door creaked. The wind, or something else. He didn't move. He just sat there, staring at nothing, letting the silence close around him like water filling a grave. The world outside continued. Cars, voices, sunlight. But inside this house, time had stopped. He walked to the garden window. The earth outside looked calm, perfectly trimmed, as if nothing had ever happened. Beneath that soil, the story lay buried. Two graves, two hearts, one destroyed by love, one by guilt. He remembered the way she said his name. Not softly, never softly, always trembling, always desperate. Dante, that sound haunted him more than any scream. For a moment, he imagined her standing there again. The way she would fix his tie, the way she'd look at him like he was her whole world. And then he'd remember the truth. Her hands covered in blood, her lips whispering, "I did it for us." He closed his eyes. There was no us. There never had been. He lit a cigarette, even though he hadn't smoked in years. The smoke curled upward, disappearing into the light. Every drag felt like punishment, a way to keep himself grounded in a body that didn't feel alive anymore. In the mirror across the room, he caught sight of himself, and for a split second, he didn't recognize the man staring back. This wasn't the Mafia boss anymore. This was a man who'd lost the only thing he never thought he'd have. Peace. He thought of leaving, selling the mansion, burning it down, but he couldn't. He was tied to this place now. By blood, by memory, by the ghosts of two women who had loved him in entirely different ways. He walked back to the hall and paused by the staircase. On the top step, a single red rose lay wilted, fresh yesterday, dying today. He didn't know who placed it there. Maybe the housekeeper, maybe no one at all. He picked it up, stared at it, and whispered, "I hope you both found peace, because I never will." The rose fell from his hand and landed softly on the marble floor. Dante turned away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet that swallowed everything. And in that silence, if someone had listened closely, if they had really listened, they might have heard a whisper drifting through the mansion's walls. "You said forever." Days passed, maybe weeks. Time inside the mansion didn't move anymore. It just lingered, heavy and still, like the air before a storm that never comes. The servants had stopped asking questions. They moved quietly, spoke in whispers, and left before dark. Something about the house felt wrong now, like every wall was listening. One evening, the new housekeeper, Rosa, was cleaning the garden. She had just been hired, didn't know the full story. Dante rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were short, clipped, heavy with something that made her shiver. She hummed to herself to fill the silence. The rake scraped against the soil, then clink, metal against something hard. She frowned and bent down. A small patch of soil near the roses looked uneven, too fresh. She dug carefully, pulling away the dirt until something silver glimmered under the fading light. A necklace, delicate, dusty, still shining. Rosa brushed it off, wiping away the mud. The pendant had initials, ID. She didn't recognize them. But Dante did. He stepped out from the terrace just then, his eyes catching the silver flash in her hands. His expression froze. "Where did you find that?" His voice was soft but sharp enough to cut. Rosa stammered. I was just cleaning, sir. It was buried near the roses." "Give it to me." He snatched it from her hand before she could even finish. The warmth of the metal burned against his palm like it had been waiting for him. He stared at it. The same necklace Isabella, his wife, wore every day. He remembered fastening it around her neck one morning. The way she smiled and said it made her feel like she belonged to him. Now, here it was, buried in the same soil that held her body. Rosa looked at him, eyes wide. "Sir, is something wrong?" He didn't answer. He just turned away, gripping the necklace so tightly his knuckles went white. That night, Dante couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, the pendant lying on the table before him, its silver glint catching the light from a single lamp. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. The air felt too heavy, pressing down on him, whispering things he didn't want to hear. The memories came back. Elena's trembling voice, her tears, her confessions, the way she said she was in the way. Now the earth itself seemed to be speaking, revealing, reminding. He stood up and walked to the window. The garden looked peaceful again, the roses standing tall in the moonlight. But he knew better now. Peace was a lie. He walked outside barefoot, the cold grass brushing against his feet. The night was still, no wind, no sound, just silence so deep it almost hummed. He knelt beside the roses. His hands dug into the dirt, slow, deliberate, like a man trying to dig out his own sins. His fingers touched something hard beneath the soil. He froze. Then slowly, he pulled it out. A second necklace, the one Elena used to wear, 2 pendants, 2 women, both buried under the same roses. He stared at them, one in each hand. One belonged to the woman he loved, the other to the woman who destroyed her. And now, both belonged to the ground. The wind finally stirred, gentle but cold. The roses swayed slightly, their petals brushing his hand like they were whispering secrets. He dropped both necklaces back into the earth. He didn't deserve to keep them. As he covered them again with soil, something inside him broke completely. Not with noise, not with a scream, but with a quiet finality that settled into his bones. When Rosa came out in the morning, she saw him still there, sitting on the grass, eyes empty, the soil freshly disturbed before him. She didn't ask. She didn't want to know. But that night, as she watered the plants, she noticed something strange. 2 roses had bloomed side by side, one deep red, one pale white. And from that day on, No matter how many storms came, those 2 flowers never wilted. Nights had started to blur for Dante. He didn't sleep anymore. He just existed, moving from room to room, haunted by the silence that refused to leave him alone. Every corner of the mansion carried an echo, a sound that shouldn't be there. Footsteps when he was alone, the faint clink of a cup on a saucer, or the rustle of a dress behind him. He told himself it was memory. That grief could make the mind cruel, but sometimes when the wind was still and his heartbeat slowed, he heard her. Elena. It began one night when he walked into the dining hall. The table was still set for 2. Plates, silverware, a candle that hadn't been lit since that night. He reached for the matchbox and stopped, because someone had already lit the candle. The flame flickered, calm and steady. He stared at it. His breath froze. Then behind him, a whisper, soft, familiar, "You said forever." He turned instantly. No one, just shadows. The curtains swayed slightly, though the windows were closed. His voice broke the silence. "Elena?" Only the echo of his own voice came back. He stood there for a long time, frozen between disbelief and guilt. The air felt colder, his pulse hammered, his throat tight. He forced himself to blow out the candle, but even after the flame died, the smell of roses filled the air, stronger, fresher than ever before. He backed away slowly, his eyes locked on the table, on the single flame that had somehow sparked itself back to life. That night, he didn't go to his room. He stayed awake in his study, the necklace still lying on his desk, now dull with dust. Every hour the clock ticked louder, pressing against his mind. And then, another sound. A faint, melodic hum. The same tune Elena used to hum when she cleaned the floors. The sound drifted from the hallway, distant yet clear, like a memory stepping out of the dark. He rose to his feet, every instinct telling him to stop. But he followed it. The mansion's halls stretched endlessly, lined with portraits that seemed to watch him pass. The hum grew louder as he descended the stairs, leading him toward the garden doors. He opened them. Cold air hit him. The moonlight spilled across the grass, lighting the roses. 2 flowers stood in full bloom, red and white, glowing faintly under the pale light. The humming stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then a whisper came again. Right behind him this time, close enough to feel on his neck. "You said forever, Dante." He froze. His breath caught. The voice was clear now. Not memory, not imagination. It was her. He turned slowly. The garden was empty, but the air shimmered slightly, like heat over water. The faint outline of a woman's silhouette flickered near the roses. Transparent, trembling, beautiful, and broken. "Elena," he breathed. The shape tilted its head, the voice trembling through the air. "Do you miss me?" He wanted to speak, to scream, to beg, but no words came. The roses began to move, their petals opening wider as if breathing. The red one bled color into the soil. The white one shimmered like glass. The voice came again. Softer now. "I'm still here. You buried me too deep, but love doesn't die that easily." He took a slow step forward, but the shape faded, like smoke slipping through his fingers. Silence. Only the sound of his own heartbeat remained. Dante fell to his knees beside the roses, his hands shaking, dirt pressing into his skin. His lips trembled. "I didn't mean to. I didn't." But the whisper cut through him one last time, closer than ever, right against his ear. "I know. That's why I stayed." The air went cold. The candle in the dining hall blew out on its own. When morning came, the servants found Dante asleep beside the roses, his hand resting gently on the soil, as if holding someone's hand buried beneath it. He didn't wake for hours. And when he did, he swore he could still feel her heartbeat beneath his palm. The mansion woke with the morning light, but Dante didn't. He sat on the garden bench, eyes fixed on the roses, red and white, swaying gently in the wind. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. The whispers had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than sound. He almost wished they hadn't, because silence meant she was gone. And if she was gone, he was truly alone. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes dark, face hollow. The ring of a gunmetal watch clinked softly on his wrist, a reminder of time he couldn't rewind. For the first time in years, Dante wasn't the Mafia boss anymore. He was just a man, haunted, broken, stripped of every mask he had ever worn. He stood slowly, walking toward the graves, though no one knew they were graves but him. The air smelled faintly of earth and roses, that same mix that had followed him since the night he buried his sins here. He knelt down between the flowers and whispered, "You both wanted forever. Maybe this is it." The ground felt cold under his hand. He closed his eyes. Behind his lids, he saw them. Isabella, his wife, smiling softly as she poured his coffee. Elena, eyes full of fire, whispering, "I'd die for you." And she had. His chest ached with something worse than pain. It was the emptiness that comes after it. He didn't hear the servant approach. Rosa stopped a few feet away, clutching a letter. "Sir," she said gently, "this came for you." It was in her old room, the maid's room. He turned, slow, like he was waking from a dream. She handed it to him and left quietly. He unfolded the letter with trembling fingers. The handwriting was shaky but familiar, looping, desperate, the way Elena used to write when she was nervous. "Dante, I know what I've done can't be forgiven, but when I look at you, I feel something that doesn't belong in this world. I never wanted to hurt her. I just wanted to be close to you, even if it meant burning everything I touched. If love is a sin, then I've already been punished. I just hope you remember me not as the monster who buried your wife, but as the woman who would have given her soul for you." The letter ended with 3 words, smudged by tears. "Forever yours, Elena." Dante's hands shook. He folded the letter and pressed it against his chest. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe, just knelt there between the 2 graves, as if waiting for the earth to answer him. And maybe it did. Because when the wind passed through the garden again, the roses bent, both of them, toward him. Their petals brushed his hand, soft as breath. He looked up at the sky, the sunlight too bright, almost cruel, and he whispered the last thing his heart had left to say. "I loved you both, just at different times." Then he stood, leaving the letter beneath the roses. He walked back toward the mansion, slow, heavy, like a man carrying ghosts on his shoulders. From the distance, the house looked almost peaceful again. No screams, no whispers, no blood, just quiet walls holding secrets no one else would ever know. Inside, on the piano in the main hall, a single note played. No one touched the keys, but the sound hung in the air, soft, lingering, heartbreaking. He paused at the doorway, closing his eyes for just a second. And in that second, he swore he heard her voice again, faint, warm, close to his ear. "You said forever." His lips parted. And this time he answered. "I meant it." The sound faded. The light dimmed, and for the first time since that night, the mansion finally rested. 2 candles flickered beside the twin graves, one red, one white. Their flames danced together for a moment before merging into one, and as the wind carried the last whisper through the air, the voice returned, gentle and final. "Now, forever starts. He still doesn't know. The woman he trusts most buried his wife right beneath his feet. But secrets like these, they don't stay quiet forever. Not in this mansion, not in love this dark." Subscribe now to BRD Stories Hub, where every heartbeat hides a secret, and every love story burns a little too deep. She loved the Mafia boss too much, so she killed his wife,